Is this our weekend off till the rest of the year or not?
This is anything but, because we got Bellator on Friday and UFC Saturday.
And we have to talk about the big show this past weekend, UFC 203 in Cleveland, Ohio.
You say the big show, but you don't mean Paul White. We're not talking WWE.
Well, we are talking WWE superstars, former WWE superstar CM Punk in the same building that he had his last match in.
Yeah, actually, I believe he gave reporters a tour of the room where he said, "I quit."
That's crazy.
Well, what's crazy is what actually happened to him, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So we should just start off with UFC 203, then we'll do some news, then we'll preview this weekend's action. But let's start in Cleveland. But let's start at the bottom and work our way up this time. And we're going to start with the prelims. What's that?
It just cracks me up because of Drake being a Canadian rapper. Started from the bottom, now we here.
Oh, yeah. I have too many Drake jokes in my head about Degrassi, so I'm just going to move on. Let's start with the prelims. And actually, you know what? Before we start with the prelims, Stevie, I want you to talk about one of the fights on the prelims that got canceled because of a scary trip inside an elevator.
Well, what do you want me to say about it exactly? This elevator malfunctioned like 3 or 4 times in the course of a weekend. Uriah Faber was in it one of the times that it broke, and CB Dollaway was in it when it dropped 3 stories, and it messed up his back so badly that he wasn't even able to take his fight, and it had to be scrapped.
Now that's the second fight on this card that got scrapped within a week of the show because of, I shouldn't say fluke accidents. One was an illness, but
yeah, Ian McCall lost his opponent due to an illness, and they didn't have a replacement.
2 big names in CB Dollaway and Ian McCall, not on this card. I think it hurt it overall.
You should say it a little differently than that, because Ian McCall was ready to fight. What happened wasn't his fault. And CB Dollaway, he would have fought, but he got hurt.
I wonder how long he's going to be on the shelf for.
Well, it's a back injury, so that's not good. Apparently, the longer the day went on, the worse it felt. So who knows just what exactly happened when you drop 3 stories. He might have a herniated disc or God knows what.
I think if I was to put money on it, I'd say anywhere from 3 to 4 months.
I don't even want to speculate at this point because we both know how tough fighters are. These are people who will go into cages with injuries already existing from their training camps and just act like nothing's wrong and gut it out, and then after the fight they'll be like, yeah, I messed up my foot in training, I tore my ACL in training, but I still wanted to take the fight. So, you know, if CB Dollaway messed up his back to the point he couldn't fight, this might be more than 4 months.
Or it might not even been his decision. The doctors could be like, we're not letting you fight.
You know what, if I fell 3 stories in an elevator, I wouldn't want to do anything, let alone get in a cage.
All right, well, let's go to the prelims. There's only one on Fight Pass, and that was Yancy Medeiros beating Sean Spencer in the second round at the 49-second mark with a rear naked choke.
And earned a fight bonus.
Absolutely. And as far as the FS1 prelims were concerned now, I had reports that some of the prelims were delayed because of, I want to say soccer or some other stuff here in Canada on TSN. So they moved the prelims from TSN to the Fight Network. That is what I was told.
I wouldn't know anything about it. That would be entirely up to you to report on because everything aired on FS1 here.
And it's funny because I had a couple of messages from friends in Canada saying, come on, somebody put the ball in the net. I want to watch my prelims.
Well, it depends on which ones, because if you caught the first 2, you saw some good action. And if you caught the last 2, you might have been bored and or you might have been pissed.
Well, Drew Dober beating Jason Gonzalez with a knockout a minute 45 in.
Okay, now Jason Gonzalez did not look like a lightweight.
Nope.
I mean, we're talking...
What's he doing at weight class?
Yeah, exactly. He's like super skinny, well built, but, you know, it was like, oh, what was that guy that used to fight at bantamweight? George Roop. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
That guy was like 6 foot and 135 pounds, and you just looked at him like, no fucking way this guy is a bantamweight. And you know what? Jason Gonzalez probably shouldn't be a lightweight either, because Drew Dober may not have been as big as him, but he was a lot more powerful than him.
And Nick Lentz beat Michael McBride TKO in the second round at 417. Now, this was a catchweight at 158, but you can forgive McBride for missing weight on this just because it was very short notice for him to take this fight.
Yeah, he took it on 1 week, so A, you couldn't have expected any other result, and B, you had to think that him meeting it at a catchweight was entirely okay with UFC because he had virtually no time to prepare.
No. Brad Tavares beating Kyle Magalhaes. Split decision here. I watched the second half of this fight, so I don't know what happened in the first half.
Probably saw the same thing no matter which half of it you watched. It was not what I would call exciting.
No, I have to read the scores. 30-27, 29-28, and 28-29. So, did Tavares win all 3 rounds on your scorecard?
No, by only what I can call the smallest of margins. Maybe not razor thin, but just enough to get him over the hump. I would have given it to Tavares 2-1.
That's fair. And Correa beating Jessica Evil Eye, split decision. I think Correa won this fight.
I'm not so confident in that.
Really?
I feel like Jessica Eye did enough in 2 out of 3 rounds to win this. And I was shocked when they read the decision, and so were the people who were there at the Quicken Loans Arena, because I was the hometown favorite, and this really isn't good news for Jessica Eye, because that's her 4th straight loss and 5th out of 6, so she kinda got hosed here.
Now, the only thing I could say is that she's a benefit from a division that isn't as well stacked as a lightweight or, welterweight, where there's so many people wanting to come into the division. The women's divisions, you can have someone who has more of a downward trajectory as far as their win-loss record is concerned. But, I mean, you fight these two fighters 10 times, it might be 5-5.
Maybe so, but I don't think Jessica is going to get many more chances now. Even the ranking advisory that they sent out to us said she could drop to the bottom of the top 15, if not out altogether. And when they're using that kind of language in their own advisory, they're pretty much telling you somebody's on the verge of being cut.
I wonder. I didn't even think about that. Could she get cut after this?
Like I just said, 4 losses in a row, 5 out of 6.
I'm sure Invicta would like to have her.
I'm sure a lot of places would, but at the same time, I don't think she lost this fight, so it's unfortunate if she does get cut off of it. Alright,
and let's move straight to the main card on UFC 203 on pay-per-view. Jessica Andrade beating Joanne Calderwood. Sick guillotine choke at 4:38.
Yeah. One-sided. Lopsided, I would even go so far as to say. Andrade is a very strong, very well-defined, very compact and muscular fighter, and she's a great submission artist, and she showcased all of those things. Her striking power was in full effect. Her ground game was in full effect. Calderwood just seemed overwhelmed from the first time she got touched.
When it went to the ground, I'm like, uh-oh. Like, just red flag went up, like, this is not going to be good. Like, she needs to get back on her feet. No, don't go. It's over.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that's slowing down Andrade right now on her march to a potential title shot is the fact that she's lost 2 of her last 5. I mean, she's won 2 in a row, but those losses to Raquel Pennington and Marion Renault, that hurts.
Depends on who they put her up against next. That'd be very telling as to what the promotion thinks of her.
Right. If she was able to beat a top 5 opponent in her next fight, then she could be knocking on that door.
What's she ranked now?
Well, that's hard to say because we're taping in advance as we always do, and the official...
What is she in your ranking?
Again, that's hard to say because it's already been submitted, so I can't pull it up until it's released, and it's not released until after we tape.
Yeah.
So, do you want to know where she was ranked last week? Because I'll tell you that.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
In UFC's official rankings from last week before this show was taped, in the women's strawweight division, here are your top 10 fighters. The champion is Miocic, Gadelha is number 1, Kulakevich is number 2, Esparza is number 3, Namajunas is number 4, Tisha Torres is number 5, and Jessica Andrade is number 6, followed up by Calderwood, Van Zandt, Letourneau, and Mraz. So, I would expect by the time you're listening to this show that Andrade has moved up a spot and Calderwood has dropped a couple.
I'd give her Torres.
I think Tisha Torres would be a good fight, although she's probably moving ahead of her, so maybe Namajunas.
Yeah, Rose would be a tough fight.
That would be the one where she could really prove herself. If she's going to be competing for the strawweight title, I'm not saying Namajunas is a gatekeeper, but I am saying if you can't beat her, you're not beating the champ.
Yeah, but it's a good thing Rose doesn't hit hard.
Yeah, Rose hits hard, Rose submits harder, and that's why I'm saying, actually, stylistically, that would be a more interesting match, because Torres would be a tough test, but I think Rose would be a fun fight.
Just don't get tagged, because you'll be flash forward next week.
Right.
All right, Jamie Rivera beating Uriah Faber.
Did you just call him Jamie?
No, Jimmy.
It sounded like you said Jamie.
No, I said Jimmy. Jimmy Rivera beating Uriah Faber. That's one thing. I did not see it 30-27 across the board.
All right, well, we have so many different things to talk about in this fight. Let's start with the eye poke.
We have to talk about eye pokes again.
We do,
this
because...
is a running theme, man, I'm telling you. They gotta stop this.
Okay, well, then you gotta tell Uriah Faber that just because he's from California doesn't mean he can do a Stockton slap. Leave that to the Diaz brothers.
Stockton slap.
Sacramento and the 209 are not the same, so don't think Sacramento and Stockton are gonna do the same things.
I don't know what you'd call that. I mean, that was just...
Some people are accusing him of blatantly doing it. Like, people are saying Faber knew he was losing and used a cheap desperation tactic. I don't think it was purposeful, but I understand why people think Faber was getting desperate, because he was losing that fight.
Now, what's Faber's nickname again?
The California Kid.
And when does he stop being a kid?
Well, he's 37 now, so you tell me.
I think someone told me this is the first non-title bantamweight fight he's lost.
And he was widely expected to lose it, if you recall from our fight preview and the odds.
Yeah, I know. You gotta think of his career, definite Hall of Fame career, but...
He's now on the downside.
Alright, so I got a little bit of news on this one here. Faber cut 21 pounds for this fight.
I don't think it was the cut that had anything to do with his performance. I think it's just the fact that at 37, he's no longer the fastest or the strongest guy in his weight class. And up-and-coming guys like Jimmy Rivera that are really hungry, that are on win streaks, that are 10 years younger than him, those are the kind of guys who are going to eat him for lunch. And that's why exactly what happened is exactly what I expected.
I never thought I'd say this, but is Uriah Faber a gatekeeper Or do you think he just leaves fighting and just becomes a coach full time?
Well, he already owns a bunch of gyms, and he's the captain for all intents and purposes of Team Alpha Male. Does he really need to be a fighter? I mean, he's gonna be a success in the business world with or without fighting.
What does he have left to prove?
Really nothing. I know it would be a feather in his cap to actually have been a UFC champion, but if you want to look at it in a larger sense, he was a 5-time defending WEC champion, and WEC got bought by Zuffa.
I think the only way Uriah Faber becomes a UFC champion if he buys the title belt or plays UFC 2 on PS4 and Xbox One.
I think just the timing of the whole thing did not work out for him. If they had bought it sooner, he would have come in as the champ. If they had bought it later, he probably wouldn't have been a champ there anymore, and he might have just retired anyway. So I'd say he got the most out of his UFC run he could, and now he's getting to the downside of it.
All right, now we go to the SmackDown main event. The one of 3 feature fights here. Mickey Gall defeating CM Punk in 2 minutes and 14 seconds.
Okay, well, I did say there were multiple things to talk about in the Rivera-Faber fight, but I'd rather just move on because I don't even want to talk about the kick to the balls. I'd rather talk about the kick to the balls wrestling fans took when they saw how CM Punk got massacred here. Now, what was he thinking by running straight at Mickey Gall? What kind of strategy was that? I'm looking at him charging towards him like, dude, you're gonna get fucking taken down immediately doing that. And sure as shit, he got double-legged and just passed immediately. Like, where's all that jujitsu? Where's all that ground game? Where's all this training that he had supposedly done? Because Mickey Gall passed his guard with ease and just started laying in the hammers.
And, when he took a running charge, I immediately thought of a Ronda Rousey fight where it was over in 12 seconds.
Yeah, it was almost that. I think Mickey Gall, in his pre-fight interview, said he felt he had to prove a point, and I think winning in 12 seconds would have actually been contrary to his purpose. He wanted to show people that he was a real fighter and CM Punk was not, and by beating the crap out of him and then submitting him, he proved that point in spades.
The only thing you could take away from this fight, and I'm not being sarcastic, I'm just stating a fact here, he lasted longer than Brock Lesnar's debut fight in UFC.
I realize you're not being sarcastic, but...
Then again, I'm not saying Mickey Gall is a Frank Mir.
No, you're not. And that's why I want to differentiate here for the record, since people are listening and this is going into the archive for history. I want to differentiate from what you just said. The difference between those two fights is Brock Lesnar was a great athlete coming in. He had been a dominant collegiate wrestler. That's what got him recruited to WWE, because he had the kind of collegiate wrestling background that people drool about today in mixed martial arts. Those are the kind of guys that they're looking for in professional fighting. So he could have been a UFC fighter all the way back then, but he went to WWE because UFC was not that big at the time like it is today. So the difference here is that CM Punk, as far as I know, with all respect due to the man, was not a collegiate wrestler, was not even a high school athlete. He's probably got good cardio because he's done lots of long matches in his career, matches that have lasted an hour or more in the wrestling ring. But there's a whole world of difference between being somebody with good cardio and being a great athlete, because you can train for cardio without being a great all-around athlete. You or I can go to the gym and run on the treadmill for 2 hours every day until we've got great cardio, but that doesn't mean we're going to win a UFC fight.
the same thing we said before about why would you run? Why would you take that running start? Like, I thought it was just an adrenaline thing.
I think he realized he was fucked. I think he thought, if I don't charge in here and land a good lucky punch, I'm fucked. I think he just let his nerves take over and charged straight at him, thinking, this is the only chance I got.
After the fight, Mickey Gall did a very smart thing. And when I mean smart, this is picture perfect what he should have done. Who do you want to fight next?
I want Sage Northcutt.
Answer.
I want Sage Northcutt. I think that guy's hair looks stupid. I want to punch the spikes.
You go from one good promo to... Some people are calling it Rocky-esque. I think that's a little much. But...
I'm going to call it Cartman-esque.
Why is that?
Follow your dreams. You can achieve your goals. I'm living proof. Big cake! That's basically what he said. He said, follow your dreams. Whether you win or lose, it's better to try than not.
I can't remember the last time we had a South Park reference on this show.
But that's all I could think of was CM Punk was basically giving the follow your dreams speech. No matter how improbable, no matter whether or not you're going to fail, you should at least try. That was his whole shtick, for lack of a better word.
Is he one and done in UFC?
Well, Dana White sure seemed to think so.
I
Really,
think you give him one more fight.
I understand why you would, and I also understand why you wouldn't. This is one of those things where, again, I need to be very clear about this, because this is going into the archives, and people are going to listen to this again someday, somewhere, at some time. So let me 100% explain why I mean that. I see why you would do it, because the show garnered extra interest and did a better buy rate because CM Punk was on it. So all those people that are complaining that he got $500,000 for a fight where he got humiliated, shut the fuck up, because everybody else on this card made more money by CM Punk being on it, so he earned that $500,000. But to those same people, I say, if you don't want to see him fight again, I have no quarrel with you, because he did not look good. He did not look competitive. He did not look like he belonged there. So why are you putting him in another UFC fight? Because if he can't beat a guy with only 2 pro fights under his belt, he's probably not beating anybody else that's 0-0 either, because chances are they've been training for a lot longer than he has, and they are probably more athletic coming into a fight than he is. At his age, he's never going to catch up. You cannot start from scratch at the age that CM Punk is and achieve what he wants to achieve. You have to have had some kind of athletic background. Even the guys who have had freak show fights, the Johnny Mortons, the Herschel Walkers, the whatever, they were athletes coming into their fights. Athletes in other sports, but they were athletes.
So by that definition, are you saying a pro wrestler is not an athlete?
I'm saying not all pro wrestlers are the kind of athletes that Brock Lesnar is. That's what I'm saying. If you're a wrestler who comes from an amateur wrestling background or a collegiate wrestling background, then you're probably a really good overall athlete. Or you could be somebody that they recruited out of football, like The Rock. You know, he played college football at a high level. He wanted to be a professional football player. He pursued those dreams to Canada. Those dreams didn't pan out for him. Wrestling was his fallback. He got recruited into wrestling. His dad agreed to train him. The rest is history. Wrestling turned out to be his calling, but he was an athlete before he was a wrestler.
There are some, if you're going to use the wrestling example, there's a couple of pro wrestlers that back in the day, if the UFC was where it is now, and they didn't have a football or a sports background, but they would definitely be an MMA fighter. I'm thinking like the Hakus, the Regals, the Finleys, something where they never played sports, but they're just badass, tough fighters.
Well, okay, some people in the early dawning days of UFC might have made a go of it when everybody came in with just one discipline, and if your discipline was, I'm pretty good with my hands, then you might be able to beat some people. But then again, the Hoist Gracies of the world might take you down to the ground and submit you and humble you.
Well, if you want to talk the Dark Ages, what exactly is pit fighting?
True.
All right, co-main event. Fabricio Verdum against Travis Brown. We talked about eye pokes before.
Oh,
there's a really sick photo going around from this fight.
Yeah, it looked like he got gouged in the eye, not just poked, like stuck it in and twisted.
Okay, I know we've done a lot of wrestling talk, and Danny will pop for this, but you want the finger? Here's the finger!
Oh, man. This fight was entertaining, perhaps for all of the wrong reasons. First of all, 2 seconds, and I do mean literally count 1001, 1002. By the time you're done counting, Fabricio Verdum had already thrown a flying sidekick to the head. Unlike CM Punk, he actually had a plan when he charged forward. It wasn't, I'm going to get charged forward and double leg to the ground immediately because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. No, Fabricio Verdum was like, I'm going to go out here and try to knock this guy out in 2 seconds by something he's not expecting. And it almost worked. But then the fight got fucking weird. Because Travis Brown took a punch that dislocated his finger. The most jacked up referee in all of referees, Gary Copeland, calls time. You cannot call time for an injury. If a fighter wants the fight stopped, then he's verbally submitting. And then Fabricio Verdum, through no fault of his own, runs over there, socks the guy in his head because he didn't see Gary Copeland call for time. So the doctors are looking at it. I'm thinking, this fight's over. He just quit. He pops his finger back into place, or tries to, and then the fight continues. And I'm perplexed. Joe Rogan is perplexed. Mike Goldberg is perplexed. They call Mark Ratner over, and he's like, yeah, that should have been stopped. And I'm thinking to myself, well, how about you get up there on the cage, Mark, and tell them that?
You know, there's a lot of ways you could go with this one. And
well, the way you can go with it is downhill, because from there it all went downhill.
You know,
this fight turned into a shit show. Other than the eye poke, what's noteworthy about the next 2 rounds? Nothing. The crowd was booing. They hated this fight. Neither one of these guys did a damn thing.
I saw a good meme from this fight, and it was basically a picture of the jacked up referee, and the bottom half of the picture had Nate Diaz saying, that referee's on steroids.
How could you look at him and not think that?
He's on everything but roller skates.
Yeah. Gary Copeland looks like he wanted to be a fighter, and somewhere along the line he lost his way and ended up as a referee instead.
So he took the John McCarthy route.
Well, no, John McCarthy actually fought. There is a difference.
Yeah, but he wanted to be in one of the UFCs, but they said, no, we need you as a ref.
Right, but John McCarthy had actually had a fighting background. He had trained at the very same gym that Art Davie trained at when he came up with the idea of UFC.
Okay. Well, okay, we'll just say that Verdum won via unanimous decision, 29-28, 30-27, and 29-27. So 3 different scores, same result. Verdum wins.
And
explain the post-fight.
When it comes to striking, I will say he outstruck Brown. So I give him that much. But what exactly is it you want me to say about this post-fight interview, other than the fact that Verdum thinks he's still the number 1 contender?
The kick of the coach.
Oh, okay. You see, I thought you were talking about what he was campaigning for in the interview after the fight. I didn't think you were talking about Edmund Tarvedian being a fucking dipshit. Pardon my language. Edmund is an idiot.
We're not using light language here. Oh boy.
He got in there and started calling Verdum everything under the belt worse than I just said, and apparently felt that Verdum had taken a cheap shot at Brown because of that whole whatever it was in round one that should have stopped the fight and didn't. And again, not Verdum's fault because he didn't see the referee call for time. And really, there's no such thing as calling for time in a UFC fight anyway. The fight's over or it's not. So, he's getting in there, he's getting heated, and Verdum's like, get out of my face, and gives him a kick to get him away because he thinks this guy is going to throw a punch at him. Both of the fighters, their entire ringside cornermen, all rush into the cage. The referee's holding them back. The officials are holding them back. Finally, he says, all the corners, all the seconds, get out!
It reminded me of CBS Strikeforce.
Yeah, there was a very Shields, a Diaz-esque feel to it, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So, before we go to the main event, Stevie, do you think Verdum will have anything as far as sanctions or anything is concerned as far from the commission?
I don't expect he would because Edmund was the instigator in this case by getting in there, cussing up a storm, menacing him. I think Verdum was acting in self-defense because somebody was being aggressive.
So the problem I have here is that if this was Nevada, yes, it's in Ohio. I don't think there'll be sanctions.
I doubt they're going to do anything about it, and I don't blame Verdum because Edmund was being a fucking idiot.
Alright, well, after that brouhaha, we go to the main event, and Stipe Miocic against Alistair Overeem for the heavyweight title, and 4 minutes and 27 seconds later, Miocic is still your heavyweight champion of the UFC.
You know, sometimes, and I don't mean to criticize on the air, but I'm going to anyway, sometimes I wish you would let us talk about the fight before we talk about the result. I know you wanted to get it over with and say it, but the story of this fight is not the fact that Stipe Miocic won at 4 minutes 27 seconds. It's everything that happened before that.
I thought the story was after the fight.
No, to me the story is before the fight was finished because Overeem, inexplicably or perhaps predictably, depending on your point of view, spent the fight running away from Stipe Miocic. Even though he is as jacked up looking as Gary Copeland, or maybe more so, and has been for years now, it appeared his strategy in this fight was do anything possible not to get hit by Stipe. And in the process of constantly backpedaling, he actually managed to land one good punch that dropped his opponent, and then he immediately went for a submission. Now, this is where I say this is the story of the fight, and this is probably what you're referring to, but this is why I said we have to talk about what happened before we get there, because he's trying to go for a choke, and Stipe is moving to get out of it. You know, he manipulates the body, he's using his hands to grab onto things, but nothing he's doing looks like can be interpreted as or would constitute a tap. He's just fighting to get out of a dangerous position. And the referee clearly recognized that and did not call for a tap and end the fight. There is nothing, no matter what angle you look at it or how many replays you look at, that constitutes a tap here. But the fight, in Alistair Overeem's view, should have ended at that point because he thinks he felt Miocic tap. The fight did not end at that point. It continued. Miocic finally caught up with him. He couldn't flee for long enough. He hurt him. He rocked him. It went to the ground. When he was on top of him, he rained down several straight right hands in a row. One of them clearly and definitively put Alistair Overeem's lights out to the point where you saw his head drop back onto the canvas. His eyes were rolled up in his head and he was not moving. That was when the fight was over, not this phantom tap. So, that's the result of the fight. They interview both of the fighters afterward, and that's where Overeem comes up with this defense of, he tapped out, and Joe Rogan, without missing a beat, busts his balls live on pay-per-view. Let's look at the footage from the truck. Roll the footage. So we see the choke applied. There's no tap. And Joe Rogan's like, well, let's give it a second chance. Let's look at it from a different angle. And there's no tap. And Joe Rogan's like, we didn't see it.
See, Overeem running around, I just thought it was mind games. He was trying to get inside the head of Miocic at the early start of the fight. And I'm like, I haven't seen a fighter run away like that since one of the old Canadian cards. But
it didn't come across like he was playing mind games. It came across like, I'm not capable of taking this guy's best shot, and I'm going to avoid it until he gets tired.
Okay, I will make one point. I did see a tap in this fight.
Are you shitting me?
I did. I'm not shitting you. I did see a tap in this fight. Miocic kept tapping Overeem's head with his fist.
Okay, you had me there for a second.
Over and over again, because that knockout, I don't even know if Overeem remembers what he had for breakfast that morning.
Well, this is where I give Overeem some small benefit of the doubt, because in his concussed state, he might not have known what he was saying to Joe Rogan at the exact moment he was being interviewed. He may have just been talking out of his ass because he was on Dream Street.
He could have just took the microphone and just started saying, I like soup.
That would have made just as much sense as claiming that he got a submission.
Miocic, 427, retains the title, really didn't get hurt. Does he fight again this year?
I don't know what to say to that. I do know what to say about his post-fight interview, though. OH! Finish it, Peter. Come on.
You go for it.
It's a call and response. You're supposed to respond. OH!
Don't know it.
Yes, you do. You watch this fight. You watch college football. It's OHIO. OHIO.